suicide bombings in Israel. It has resulted in the death of thousands. Supported by the Bush administration, the Ariel Sharon government inflicted mass punishment on the Palestinian population, destroying the infrastructure and economy of the Palestinian territories. Almost 50% of Palestinians were left unemployed, with two-thirds living under the poverty line. Sharon withdrew all Israeli settlers from Gaza in September 2005. However, there were no signs of withdrawal of settlements from the West Bank when Sharon had a stroke, which left him in a coma in January 2006. Under Sharon's government, dozens of bypass roads and highways were built to allow direct access from the main Israeli cities to the settlements in the West Bank without having to cross any zone populated by Palestinians. This policy indicated clearly that the settlers were there to stay.
On the Palestinian side, there was a breakdown into two rival factions. Fatah was led by Mahmoud Abbas, elected president after the death of Arafat. Hamas is the Islamist movement, particularly popular in the Gaza Strip. After Arafat's death in November of 2004, Mahmoud Abbas, the elected president of the Palestinian Authority, tried to contain the violence and put an end to the Intifada. He resumed negotiations with the Israelis and the Americans, but received indifference from Sharon and Bush. This damaged his credibility with the Palestinian people. Their loss of trust in his ability to bring about any kind of improvement to the plight of Palestinians, the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, and the overwhelming frustration at a rapidly deteriorating situation led the Palestinians in the spring of 2006 to reject Abbas's political party, Fatah, and voted instead for Hamas. Paralysis ensued as tensions between Hamas and Fatah prevented formation of a Palestinian government. Another stumbling block was the insistence of the US and the international community that the Hamas government erase from its charter the recovery of all of Palestine as its ultimate objective.
The Americans and Israelis proceeded to arm Fatah in an attempted coup against Hamas. This escalated into near civil war among Palestinians. Hamas took control of Gaza and threw out representatives of Fatah. The rift between the power of Hamas in Gaza and that of Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah-led government in the West Bank has continued to grow ever since.
Meanwhile, the Hamas government has continued its armed struggle against the Israeli occupation, sending regular rockets into southern Israel. In retaliation, the Israeli government subjected the already impoverished Gaza Strip to a systematic blockade, resulting in economic and social chaos among Gazans. Palestinian exports were not allowed to be shipped, salaries of civil servants were not paid for months, electricity and water were regularly cut, and access to basic goods and medication was made more difficult. A humanitarian crisis ensued as poverty and malnutrition rates rose sharply. Most international aid workers and officials have called repeatedly for concerted international action to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
The continued Hamas rockets precipitated a massive Israeli attack on Gaza from December 28, 2008 to January 18, 2009, killing more than 1,200 Palestinians, most of whom were civilians. Several thousand were severely wounded, but the Israeli attacks did not destroy Hamas. Hamas in Gaza continues to rearm after the massive loss of human life and infrastructure. The Israeli attack was followed by international outrage and the demand that international human rights organizations examine possible war crimes that the Israeli army committed on civilians.
Political analysts and observers continue to argue that there can be no military solution to this complex conflict, only a politically negotiated one. The question then becomes, do leaders have the courage to confront this fact and go back to the negotiating table, or do the endless cycles of violence serve their political interests?
On the part of American leadership, it is a fact that the Bush administration paid very little attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict during most of its two terms. In June 2002, George Bush did put forth a roadmap for peace as proposed by the US, Russia, the United Nations, and the European Union. The roadmap was similar to the one proposed by Clinton in December 2000, and in the last year of Bush's presidency, there was a push for resumption of negotiations. But there seems to have been no political will on the ground at that time to seriously engage in the roadmap to peace.
For the last 3 years, the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank is the only party of the conflict that has fulfilled its responsibilities as put forth by the roadmap. Hamas in Gaza seems unconcerned with the roadmap, having been ostracized by the international community and having chosen armed resistance against Israel. And although the Israeli governments have spoken in favor of the roadmap, they have continued to build settlements in the West Bank. most analysts see US President Barack Obama as the primary